Center for Overall Treatment. Dr. Darrel Ray is going to be addressing a group called FAP here in San Antonio. And he said that he's never given this talk before, and he's eager to have it recorded for the broadcast. We're in San Antonio, Texas. Sorry, it's a little noisy. I am a rebel rouser, apparently, which is quite shocking coming from Darrel, because in my mind, he is the rebel rouser. Hey, what's up? Yeah, share it with your friends. Dr. Darrel Ray will be giving a talk today. He is the founder of the Recovery from Religion organization. He's wrote several books.
Welcome. Thanks for coming out in the weather. Sorry about the parking. We're told it's going to improve. I'm just not sure what year that's going to be. Before we have our guests, I want to mention a couple of things. We are looking for a new volunteer coordinator. So if you're interested in serving or assisting with being a volunteer coordinator, please contact a board member. We need your help. The second thing, our annual solstice party is going to take place in December. We've secured a venue. The thing we don't really have right now is a committee. So again, if you can help out with our annual party, please contact a board member. We would love the help. And now I would like to introduce a member of Free Thinkers, which you may not have seen for a while, Scott Smith, and he's going to introduce our main event, Darrel Ray. One moment.
What? Plug your podcast.
Try to get my good side, okay? Shut up. All right. Dr. Darrel Ray is the founder and chairman of the board of Recovering from Religion. All right, he's been a psychologist for 30 years. He wrote these two books, Sex and God and The God Virus. The God Virus is one that did it for me about 7 years ago. All right. I've been with Recovering from Religion since September of last year, almost a year now, with a hotline. 5 months ago, I started co-hosting the Recovering from Religion podcast. All right. And Darrel told us right from the very start, if there's anything we needed, just to reach out to him and he would help us, okay? From that moment, we knew Darrel was behind us. You have to be careful when Darrel's behind you, though. All right. So anyway, besides all that, he's a really good guy. He's down to earth. He'll help anyone out that needs help. And he's just like that. So it's a pleasure to introduce him, Dr. Darrel Ray.
I think I'll say thank you, Scott, but I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. But I'll take it the best way possible. Oh no, I love Scott, and I love what they're doing with our podcast, the Recovery from Religion podcast. And what he's doing for the hotline and all that other stuff. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. But before we get started, everybody's asking me about this, so I'm getting tired of telling everybody the stories. I'm going to tell you the story, and we'll get it out of the way, okay? I was dumb enough to go climbing mountains with my 36-year-old son 2 weeks ago. And that's not the problem. I climbed lots of mountains. My hobby is mountain climbing. My problem is going with my 36-year-old son who thinks I should keep up with him. And I didn't keep up as well as I wanted to, and got sprained something in my shoulder. So that's what happened here. Now the challenge will be, can I give a talk without flailing my hands everywhere? Because I talk with my hands. If you've been to one of my talks, you know I talk a lot with my hands. So I'm going to put this microphone here, and hopefully I won't injure myself trying to talk or not talk. Well, thanks a lot. It's always great to be back here. I think I've spoken in San Antonio, I know at least 3 times to FACT, and probably once or twice some other places for the conventions or whatever, but I always love being back here. And I'm always shocked at how big this city is. I'm from Kansas City, and we think we're a big city and everything's up to date there, but I think you've got us beat in many ways. Well, as Scott said, I am the chairman of the board and founder of Recovery from Religion. How many of you are familiar with Recovery from Religion? Oh, good. There are people who haven't heard it yet, but lots of people have, of course. But the good thing is now you know. We want everybody to know about recovering from religion. Because recovering from religion is helping people deal with the trauma of leaving whatever religion they were raised in. And we are fond of saying lots of groups will get you into religion. We're the only one that will help you out. Isn't that interesting? There's not another group on the planet that will help you get out of religion. And we do. And we're non-denominational in our help to get you out. We don't give a shit which religion you came from. We're helping you get out of it. So we have all sorts of things to help people. We've got small groups. In fact, we just brought on our new small group director. I won't say his name yet because we haven't advertised it. But we're really putting a big push on to get small groups. Right now, we have small groups meeting on a monthly basis. All over the United States, Canada, South Africa, Australia, and England. Isn't that cool? And we have some underground ones that are kind of meeting quietly in places like India and Pakistan. That's really weird. And dangerous, of course. So we also have the hotline and chat line that Scott mentioned a little bit earlier. And the hotline is a place where you can call in to talk to a well-trained agent about whatever you want to talk about. You can even still be religious. We don't care. But if you got questions and concerns, you can call us. And we've got well-trained agents that will answer the phone. And if that's only within the United States, though, if you're outside the United States, we can chat on a computer with anybody on the whole planet. Which is, we just announced this just in last April, so it's not even a year we've had the chat line. But we've got chats from Morocco. We've got chats from places like Saudi Arabia. People want to chat with us and ask, I'm an atheist in Saudi Arabia, what do I do? Yeah, well, we have to be really careful about that, obviously, and they do too. But, so anyway, we're able to help people all over the planet now. Last but not least is the Secular Therapy Project. How many of you are familiar with the Secular Therapy Project? Okay, not as many people, right. In San Antonio, if you were a secular atheist psychologist and you announced in public that you're an atheist, no judges would not refer to you. Hospitals would not refer to you. Ministers certainly wouldn't refer to you. So you would instantly lose your entire practice if you were a psychologist or a social worker or even a psychiatrist. You could have people refuse to go to you because you're an atheist. So what we've got is a Match.com kind of thing for clients and therapists. You can stay under the radar and you can register as a therapist with us. We will not out you. We'll keep you quiet and secret. So if anybody in here is a therapist, social worker, psychologist, whatever, go online and register. You can then have clients find you almost on a daily basis. We have over 9,000 people looking for therapists. We have 280 therapists registered with us. So I'm always interested in finding new therapists. If you know of a therapist that's a good therapist and you think they're secular, tell them about our website and tell them to go register. Now, we don't accept just everybody. You have to prove to us that you're secular, number one, and use evidence-based psychotherapy methods, number two. If you don't do those two things, we don't want you. We don't need good secular Catholics. It just doesn't work for us. All right, and if you want to dial into the hotline project, you can do it just by dialing 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT. 1-844-I-DOUBT-IT is the line for the Secular Therapy Project, for the hotline project. And last but not least, I'm going to plug my own podcast, besides Scott's. My podcast is called the Secular Sexuality Podcast, where we talk about all things sexy and sexual. Everything from BDSM to polyamory to porn stars in Australia. Last week we had a comedian, the guy that wrote, how many of you have seen the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights? Okay, well, that's who I interviewed last week, was J.D. Shapiro, who was the writer for Robin Hood Men in Tights. And he's a really cool guy, really interesting, funny guy that has all sorts of things to say about Argentinian sex and Spanish sex and things like that. All right, so let's get on to the talk. Today I have three things I'm going to talk about. First is the notion of a Calvinist infection of North America. All these will come together here shortly. And I'm going to steal liberally from a talk I saw not long ago by Mike Ouse. How many of you guys know Mike Ouse from Houston? Any of you? He's the guy that started Oasis down there in Houston. Love the guy. He's talked here, hasn't he? Yeah. He's been here, right. Anyway, love Mike House. He gave a great talk. It's not the same thing I'm going to give, but I stole liberally from him, and I told him up front I was, so he knows. And then I'm going to talk about George Lakoff. I'm going to bring all these things together in my third point about why is Donald Trump so darn successful right now with evangelical Christians. Why the hell would any evangelical Christian be voting for Donald Trump? So let's begin with Calvinism. John Calvin was a theological fanatic who was very liberal in the way he murdered people in Switzerland. And if you didn't agree with him, you were probably going to get stoned to death or drawn and quartered and stuff like that. And he did that to a number of people so that people would realize he was very serious about God. And then some of his followers went other places to start talking about the way John Calvin saw the world, Calvinism, if you will. And they started getting persecuted. Go figure. People who kill other people get persecuted when they go other places. So instead of being able to dominate in England, we call those people the Puritans, by the way. Instead of being able to dominate England, they said, well, we better go to Massachusetts. And if we go to Massachusetts, then we can start our own theocracy, and we can murder Quakers there. And that's what they did. The Puritans hung Quakers. I'm a Quaker atheist, by the way, so I know what I'm talking about. My uncle was a Quaker. I was kind of raised around Quakers my whole life. And one of the things that Quakers talked about frequently was how those Puritans killed them on a frequent basis. So that's what was going on in the United States, is the Calvinists, long before the American Revolution, Calvinists were coming to the United States and creating theocracies. That's what they really wanted to do. They weren't coming here, the myth of religious freedom is just that, it's a myth. They came here to get religious domination, and they did it in 4 waves. We see a wave of Calvinists coming in with the Puritans in New England, and of course that's where the myth all started about Thanksgiving and all that sort of stuff. And then the next wave came in, the French Huguenots. How many of you know who the Huguenots were? Okay, got some history buffs in here, I guess. Well, they were a French Protestant group that got pretty nastily persecuted by the Pope and by the French king, and eventually started having to leave. There was a huge diaspora of Huguenots leaving because you either converted to Catholicism or you got burned at the stake, or other bad things would happen to you. So they left, and a lot of them colonized Virginia, but we get Huguenots coming into North Carolina, and other places as well. But remember, they're Calvinist. They have the same beliefs as Calvinists, which we'll come back and talk about. And then the third was the Scots-Irish. You know, up there in the north, where there's a bunch of Calvinists. Those are Calvinists. In the Northern Ireland, they call themselves Protestants, but they're really Calvinists. And a lot of those people among the Scots and the Irish came. And then you have the Reformed churches, which we've heard of Dutch Reformed. Well, the Dutch Reformed, and there was a whole group of Reformed churches, and they too got persecuted as they traveled around Europe and tried to avoid the Lutherans and the Catholics and other people, and they too came to North America. Well, all of these people come with the Calvinist infection. Now, if you read my book, The God Virus, you know I mean seriously infected people with Calvinism. And I want to give you this little notion of Calvinism. It's really interesting to understand Calvinism. This is Calvinism in 5 easy steps. Calvinism believes 5 things. First, that you are totally depraved. That all you people in this room are perverts. And God's going to send every one of you to hell. No doubt about it. So get that in your head right now. You're all doomed because you're depraved. Second, unconditional election, that if God decided you're going to be saved, then you are saved. Third, limited atonement. Jesus, let me throw this up. Jesus died for sins, but only for a few people's sins. Not everybody gets their sins forgiven. Only a few people, and those people are the unconditionally elected. Now, who are the elected? Look around. Look around the room. Who do you think are the elected in this room? Well, if you're sitting in a Protestant church, in a Calvinist church of any kind, a Puritan church or whatever, and you were hearing Cotton Mather stand up and preaching the sermon, "Sinners in the hands of an angry God," you would see people looking around saying, wonder who's saved. I know I am, but I'm not sure he is or she is. And to that would create tons of anxiety. I mean, the Protestant Calvinists come with a lot of anxiety because nobody knows who's going to hell and who's not. So you have to be really careful. Now, there are some hints about it. I'll come back to that in a minute. Irresistible grace. If you're elected, then you're good. Period. It doesn't matter what you do. You can murder somebody and you're still going to heaven because you have irresistible grace. And if you're saved, the perseverance of the saints, you are always saved. You know those Baptists are always saying, once saved, always saved? That's where they get it. They get it from John Calvin, once saved, always saved. That's the view of the Calvinists, those 5. And you can remember it by TULIP. Total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, perseverance of the saints. There will be a test at the end to see if you're a good Calvinist. How many of you are raised in a Calvinistic tradition? Oh, must be a lot more Catholics in here than I thought there would be. How many of you are raised Catholic? Okay, see, this doesn't make any sense to the Catholics. Just doesn't make any sense, does it? Right. Okay, I went to Australia a few years ago just touring, and a guy came up to me after I gave a lecture. I was on book tour, and he said, you know, we were lucky. I said, what do you mean, how you're lucky? Yeah, here in Australia, we got the criminals. You guys got the Christians. And that's the truth. It really is the truth. Because you can go to Australia, they are not very religious, except in Queensland. They call Queensland the Alabama of Australia. And they are very religious up there. Guess what? The strongest atheist groups in all of Australia seem to come from Queensland. Just like some of the strongest atheist groups come from Alabama, I've noticed as well. Well, let's look at how this all works. Let's look at what's going on in the brain. We have 2 little things in our brain called the amygdala, from which we learn very rapidly emotional lessons. The amygdala is very much involved in learning fear messages and other emotional messages. I'm not saying it's the only thing. But the fact is, when you tell somebody, when you feel fear, your amygdala is involved. And we learn fear messages much faster than happiness or positive messages. It's a survival mechanism. Our brains are wired to make sure we stay out of harm's way. So our brains are wired to learn fear messages and to avoid those things which could harm us. Well, what if you're raised in a household that says you're going to hell? That sounds like harm, doesn't it? And your brain reacts just like your parents were getting ready to throw you into a fire. Your brain reacts just the same way when they say, God is going to throw you into a fire. Your brain gets this incredible fear response, and you learn it really fast. When did you first get the lake of fire, the hell, fire, and damnation, the damnation of Dante? When did you first hear that in your religious training?
Nice and early.
What?
Nice and early.
Nice and early, right. They usually start you off with nice little Jesus stories when you're 2 and 3 and 4 years old. But somewhere around 4, 5, 6, you start seeing, in Catholics, you know, they have the shit right up there in front. You know, guys dying on the cross. Or they have paintings of people getting tortured to death. Catholics start early, right? Dante and all that sort of, what's his name? I can't remember the name of the artist. So anyway, we learn these very quickly. Well, the Protestants, especially the Calvinists, were really, really good at these fear messages. And the fear messages, they didn't just say this, but how do you get here? They didn't just say you're going to hell, but here's how you go to hell. Here's how you go to hell. Breastfeeding will send you to hell. Did you know that? Yep. Right. So, nudity will send you to hell. Male or female masturbation, mostly male masturbation though, guys. I mean, it's wrong for us. But later they discovered that women masturbate too. So they've now added that to the list. I mean, just look at what's going on in the evangelical community right now. They've got all these, no fapping. No fapping. Even atheists are getting into this shit, which makes no sense to me at all. You saw if you were here last time, I gave my talk on the myth of sex addiction. If you didn't see that, go back and watch it. That's a supplement to what we're talking about now. Women's sexual pleasure, that will get you to hell really quick. Because women are as we know from Adam and Eve, women are the pathway through the devil to hell. Because the devil himself is what brought the woman into hell. And you can go into pornography, of course, pornography will take you to hell. And LBT, if you're anything but gender binary, you're clearly going to hell. All these are Calvinistic messages. Now, I'm not saying other religions don't have them. And as I go through what I'm talking about today, and I throw and explore some of these ideas, I don't want you to sit here and think, I know the answer to all these questions. I don't. I think these ideas are interesting. I think they explain some behavior, not all behavior. Nothing explains all behavior. But I think if you cogitate on some of the ideas I'm going to throw out here, you'll realize, wow, even you have been infected by some of these ideas. Even you as a Catholic have been infected with Calvinistic ideas. All right, so here's an idea. The idle mind is the devil's playground. Has anybody ever been told that? Did your parents enforce that kind of, we got to keep you busy because you might masturbate if you don't? That's Kellogg. That's Dr. Kellogg's philosophy. And that's why today we have Kellogg's cereal. Because Dr. Kellogg wanted to keep boys from masturbating. So he said, you got to do two things. First, you got to keep them busy. You can't let them have time to jack off. And you've got to make sure and cut the foreskin off their penis, because that's what makes them want to masturbate. Boy, I didn't know that. So you got to keep them busy. And I am not worthy if I'm not productive. How many of you have that feeling sometimes? How many of you feel guilty because you're not being productive? Yeah, come on, let's see your hands here, all you guilty Calvinists, even Catholics. Yeah, that's a Calvinistic belief. And the why I say that is because there's lots of cultures on this planet that don't have that belief. People don't feel guilty if they're not busy. I have friends in Belgium that are as productive as anybody I know, and they don't feel guilty when they take their 6 weeks of vacation. Don't feel a smidge of guilt. Do you know people like that? They don't feel any guilty about taking a vacation. But here in the United States, you should feel guilty if you take a vacation. How many of you feel guilty when you take a vacation? Look at that. We have all these Calvinists in here. And you think you're atheists. You only think you're atheists, by the way. All right, assuming you're atheist, I could be making a false assumption there. Okay, well, there's targets for this fear, and these things are sexual liberation, for example. Sexual liberation is going to send the whole society to hell in a handbasket. Or birth control. Birth control is the devil's way of letting women tempt men. Because if there's no birth, or if there's no conception, then we can go out and screw all we want, and that will destroy the Christian family. These all sound familiar, I'm sure. Gays are going to hell, of course, and gays are trying to convert the whole military to being gay. Can you imagine our military being gay? It's happening as we speak here right now. That when they stop, don't ask, don't tell, you notice the entire gay community started enlisting in the military. All right. And of course, birth control is against God's plan, and abortion kills God. Well, all these phrases come straight out of a Calvinist mindset. Now, it's not to say the Catholics don't have some of this too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they've got a market on the whole thing. They sure do have a lot of it. So, when you try to talk to somebody who's been embedded with this fear, with these fear messages, you notice you don't get very far. You cannot argue out somebody. You can't give them logic because this fear programming is so deep, and it generally started when somebody was 3, 4, 5 years old. That's a pretty deep programming. Long before your brain can decide, is this rational, logical, is there evidence for it, engage any kind of skeptical thinking process. So you cannot argue somebody out of fear programming. My suggestion is that Calvinism pervades our society in ways that you may not be aware of and may affect you. For example, laziness is of the devil. My grandmother definitely taught me that very early on. Success, wealth, is a sign of being one of the elect. And that's one of the things the Calvinists really seem to play on later. The more successful you are, the more God must be smiling on you. Now, there's other societies that believe that. Of course, Hindus, a lot of Hindu theology is based around that kind of thinking. But we see that strongly in Calvinism. And I want you to pay a little note on that, because that will come back to help us understand some things later. The righteous should rule the world. That's a very important Calvinistic concept. Now, Catholics are not righteous, by the way. And Mormons are not righteous, by the way. Only Calvinists are righteous. And it has to be a particular kind of Calvinism that agrees with my particular version of Calvinism. And what that can be a Baptist Calvinist. There's lots of different versions of it. But I'm saying most of these people think only my version is the one that's should rule the world. And so they're all, if you read my book, The God Virus, you realize these God viruses, religions if you will, are always competing to try and take over the society that they've infected. And sometimes they can do it. I mean, they did it in Saudi Arabia. They did it. The Puritans actually got ascendancy in England for a short while, for about 12 years. So we can see it happening. The Puritans did it in Massachusetts too. So we can see it happening. Is it warm in here?
Yes.
Could we maybe get some cooling down? Okay. And God is the rule and lawgiver. Have you heard that anywhere lately? Do you see Tony Perkins? Did you see what happened to Tony Perkins lately? You know, we're breaking the law down there in Louisiana and Florida, so that's why hurricanes are coming and flooding your house. His house got flooded just recently. Don't you love it? Tony Perkins. Tony Perkins is very Calvinistic, by the way. So, here's an important concept that we'll come back and explore, and that is there's no room in Calvinism for systematic causes, only individual responsibility. So, think about that. In Calvinism, you and God, their only relationship that means anything is the relationship between you and God. So when you tell a Calvinist, well, but there's institutional racism, that means nothing to them. It doesn't compute in this computer they've got up here. Systemic causes are foreign to the notion of Calvinism, because Calvinism says all individuals are individually responsible for their own salvation, and it's just your relationship to God that matters, nothing else. Everything else is an excuse for your sinful behavior. Think about that. It's just an excuse for your sinful behavior. So, let's look at two of these ideas that have really impacted our consciousness as a nation. The first is the notion of a shining city on the hill, and the second is manifest destiny. Who have you heard use this term, shining city on a hill?
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't think he even knew quite what he was saying. President Obama just used it recently too. Now this is interesting, because this is an insidious idea, because what it really is a shining Christian city upon a hill. That's the one part that's missing here, and it comes from John Winthrop, who was the first Puritan Calvinist governor of Massachusetts. Here's what he said about democracy, and he said this in, he said, I should have put the date up there. I think I got the date on here, about 1658. He said this in a sermon. If we should change from mixed aristocracy to mere democracy, first, we should have no warrant in Scripture for it, for there's no such government in Israel. A democracy is, among civil nations, accounted the meanest, worst of all forms of government. To allow it would be a manifest breach of the fifth commandment. So here's one of the so-called founders of the colonies of the United States, and he's saying democracy is the worst choice for any kind of government. Let's keep the aristocracy and the mixed form of government that he was familiar with. But that's the shining city on a hill. Where does that come from? Come on, somebody ought to know where that comes from. Jesus said it. So Jesus, you quote, looking, I believe it's in Matthew 15th chapter, he talks about shining city on a hill. I want you to be a shining city on the hill. It's a Christian concept that comes straight from Jesus. Isn't that interesting? And it doesn't say anything about Muslims. It doesn't say anything about Mormons. It's just always Christian. That's the first concept, and we'll come back to integrate all this. The second one is the concept of manifest destiny. Now, this concept has actually been involved since the beginning, since the colonists came here. But manifest destiny was an essay written in the 1830s about God giving us this land to conquer in the name of Christ. Our job as Americans is to conquer this land, subjugate this land, and rule it in the name of Christ. Just like the prophets predicted that the Israelites should conquer Israel and Palestine and subjugate it and rule it in the name of Yahweh. Exactly the same, because the United States is seen as the new Israel, the new shining city on the hill. You've heard all this, haven't you? This is not new. I don't think this is new information to most of us. But the notion of manifest destiny is a fundamentally racist concept, fundamentally cultural imperialism at its best, and it's bred right into our DNA as a nation. Listen to the way the religious right talks about the United States. We are Israel. We are the equal Israel, and we support Israel. All this Israel and the United States shit that goes on between the evangelicals and Israel is built right into this manifest destiny notion. Because Israel had a manifest destiny to conquer the Holy Land, just like the United States or Western culture had a manifest destiny to conquer and subjugate North America. So I've given you an overview of the Calvinist approach. Now we're going to move to a more modern person who's got some interesting things to say, and that's George Lakoff. How many of you are familiar with any of George Lakoff's writings? Oh, just a couple people. 2, 3. I really recommend his stuff. I think the guy's brilliant. He's really got a good way of looking and understanding the psychology, especially of our political system. He's got a good essay, and Huffington Post came out about 2 weeks ago that kind of goes over some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here. But probably one of the best books I've read by him is called Don't Think of an Elephant. I'll come back to that in a minute. So what George Lakoff talks about, he doesn't talk about it in religious terms. I just talked about it in religious terms. He talks about it in terms of how the conservative and religious mind looks at our political structure and our political system. And he identifies, I think, one of several key things, but this is the most important one for our talk today. And that's the notion of the strict father logic. So I'm going to read this to you real briefly. It's the basic idea that authority is justified by morality, the strict father version, of course, and that a well-ordered world, there should be, and traditionally has been, a moral hierarchy in which those who have traditionally dominated should dominate. The hierarchy is God above man, man above nature, the disciplined or the strong above the undisciplined or the weak, the rich above the poor, employers above the employees, adults above children, Western culture above other cultures, America above other countries. You see how this hierarchy works? The hierarchy extends to men above women, whites above non-whites, Christians above non-Christians, straights above gays, so forth. This is a very powerful model and metaphor in the mind of evangelicals and conservatives. But mostly this comes from the Calvinist approach to Christianity. So here's kind of a quick outline. It's not as comprehensive, but it's more comprehensive. It's more related to what we're talking about here today. That God's here, man's above woman, whites are over blacks, Western culture over other cultures, and so forth. Now, if you watch the way evangelicals behave, if you watch the way the religious right behaves, can you see this pattern in their behavior? It's obvious as night and day. That's their hierarchy, because that's the way God taught it, and what's the way they think God taught it anyway. So, who the hell embodies these kinds of values? And it's kind of surprising sometimes who they think embodies these kinds of values. Here's somebody that embodies this kind of value. How did Mitt Romney become the strict father? Well, isn't that weird? It doesn't even look Calvinist. But look at Mormonism. Mormonism has got a lot of Calvinism in them. Joseph Smith, after all, was raised in an area that was originally populated by Calvinists. In the 1820s and 30s, when he's creating Mormonism in the burned-over district. How many of you guys know about the burned-over district in New York State? You haven't heard about the burned-over district? Well, there were 3 counties in upstate New York that had a new religion every 6 months. And there were like 128 religions arose and caught on fire in these 3 counties over about a 10-year time period. 3 of those religions still exist today. All the others went extinct. What do we call that? Evolution. That's what we call it, evolution. 3 survive today, all the rest are extinct. 128 different religions and only 3. What are those 3 that exist today? Anybody know? Any guesses? No. Mormonism? What?
Mormonism, the Adventist Christian Science.
Yep, that's right. Mormon, and you can even trace Jehovah's Witness back to those, but they came along later. But yeah, those 3, Christian Science, Jehovah's Witness, and Seventh-day Adventists, they still exist today. But it sounds like evolution, doesn't it? You got these viruses all popping up, and not all viruses get to go from one brain to the next. Only the viruses that are most successful at going from one brain to the next are going to survive. Well, Mitt Romney belongs to Mormonism, which has a very strong, strict father image. The man rules the house. Women are clearly subservient. So the message of Mormons actually is quite compatible with evangelicals and with the religious right. So it's not really as big a surprise that Mormonism, that's not even a valid religion according to Billy Graham. Until Mitt Romney started running, of course. Within a week after Mitt Romney got the nomination for it, you go back and document this. I document it on my own website. Within a week after the nomination happened in the convention 4 years ago, the Mormons were named as a cult on Billy Graham's website. Within a week, that disappeared, and it's never come back. I didn't realize you could stop from being a cult that quickly. But according to Billy Graham, they're not a cult anymore. So it's the strict father thing that really captured the imagination of the religious right. But why do people still want to support this guy? You know, why? Oh, I mean this guy here, yeah. Why would anybody support a guy that's been married 3 times, obviously cheated on lots of the women that he was married to or wasn't married to, has done all sorts of other weird things, including talk about dating his own daughter if it wasn't his daughter and stuff like that. I mean, the guy's really creepy, I think. So why do they support Donald Trump? Well, for this reason, according to George Lakoff, I'm going to quote from him again, he repeats examples to these people of shootings by Muslims, African Americans, Latinos, and it raises the fear factor. He's plugging into the fear programming that it could happen to you and your community, despite the minuscule actual probability. Trump uses this to create fear, and the fear tends to activate desire for a strong, strict father. And what's Trump say? I will protect you. I will build a wall. I will kick all the Muslims out. So, very strong, strict father mentality. They don't really care who you fuck as evangelicals, as long as you protect them and protect their religion. And that's kind of where this whole strict father's coming from them. But this isn't the first time that the religious right has voted for somebody who clearly violates their values, which tells us that the values themselves that they espouse here are not the real values. And that's why I'm talking to you today, is we want to get underneath this psychology and try to understand what's really driving this behavior. Because back in 1980, this guy, Jerry Falwell, helped elect this guy. This guy partly darkened the church in his entire life. He was known before he was nominated pretty much as I don't give a shit kind of a Christian. He doesn't go to church. And he had said some actually negative things about religion before he became nominated. And what's the worst part, and this is terrible, he was divorced. He was divorced. He was the first person ever to be elected president who was actually divorced. And according to my granny, that was taking you straight to hell. My granny was right on all things theological, by the way. How many of you know Madalyn Murray O'Hair? Oh, some of you actually knew her, probably. I'm not old enough, but so Madalyn, my granny, she was a sweet thing. Actually, kind of nasty to most people, but she loved me. And Madalyn Murray O'Hair got the prayer thing in 1963, Supreme Court, and my grandmother just hated Madalyn Murray O'Hair. Well, Granny believed that Jesus wrote the King James Version of the Bible. So you did not argue with Granny, or she would say, go get a switch. That meant you had to go out to the tree and cut a switch, and it better be big enough because you didn't want her cutting the switch. So you cut your own switch and you get a switch in for arguing with Granny. Well, so it took me a long time. She'd say, that woman's worse than the devil, whenever she heard her name on the radio or the television. And one day I finally got the courage up to say, Granny, how can anybody be worse than the devil? Granny said, well, at least the devil believes in God. How do you argue with that theology? You know? So my granny hated Adlai Stevenson because he had been divorced. He had been divorced, if I recall. And she thought that was the worst thing. So Adlai Stevenson could not win against Eisenhower. Even though Eisenhower had a mistress most of the time, he was a general over in Europe. Go figure. So the violation of those sexual boundaries is not the issue. It's the strict father. And this guy had a strict father approach. And you'll notice, contrast him with Jimmy Carter. I'm sorry, not Billy. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter had a kind father approach, didn't he? He did not have that strict. And yet Jimmy Carter was a good Baptist who stayed married to the same woman his whole life. And yet he was the one that was wrong, not Ronald Reagan, who'd gotten divorced. So this tells us there's something deeper going on here than these so-called Christian values that they're espousing and trying to push onto other people. So that still doesn't quite answer the question of why Donald Trump is so popular. Well, how many of you heard, I like Donald Trump because he's honest? How many of you heard that? Oh, come on, you haven't been listening, you haven't heard that. All my Trump friends, and unfortunately I have some, say, I like that he's honest. Well, what they're really saying, he's not politically correct. They like the fact that he's not politically correct. And white males, especially white males, see Trump as voicing their values. He can say shit they can't get away with. So, they see political correctness as a denial of their values. And their values include men over women, Christians over other non-Christians, and Christians over Muslims, and so forth. The whole hierarchy was so other. Donald Trump violates the American values that we're all equal. Because he talks pretty clearly that men are dominant over women. He treats women in a way that shows that. All you have to do is look at a few YouTube videos of Donald Trump doing his thing. So the strict father is what's attractive to the evangelicals around Donald Trump. It matters not that he's been married 3 times, any more than it mattered that Ronald Reagan had been married twice, among other things. So, we have this strict father hierarchy, going back to what we saw earlier. This is what Donald Trump believes. No matter what he says, he said yesterday, the day before yesterday, I'm going to get 99% of the black vote. He did say that. Isn't that wild? And yet right now, only 1% of polled black are going to vote for him. And yet the guy has this mentality. And that is clear evidence of this very hierarchy thing. So, remember our Calvinism and wealth thing I said earlier? That's what's going on here. Calvinists see wealthy people as elect. Being wealthy is a sign of God smiling upon you, of you being one of the elect. So it's almost impossible for them to resist the notion that, well, God, and have you seen some of the interviews from the evangelical leaders about Donald Trump? And they're basically saying this, that he must be a god or he wouldn't be wealthy. Well, the fact is he's lost a lot of his dad's money. He probably would have had more money if he just invested in a 401k before he took over from his dad. So you're probably of the elect if you're prosperous. Here's Trump's family values. He has a very strict father approach. He doesn't brook laziness. You're fired. That's really, really attractive under the strict father mentality. He's obviously in control, and he's dominant over women and over minorities. And that's what the dominant white culture wants to see. They want somebody to get these blacks under control and these gays under control. Who's going to do it? Well, Donald Trump can do it. And he says it. He says it not even in coded language, hardly. I'm going to kick all the illegal immigrants out. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to stop Muslims from coming in. This is not even coded language. At least Mitt Romney used coded language occasionally. This guy doesn't. So what's some other reasons why there's a number of reasons, but I think these are the best psychological ones. And that is something I call, or we know in psychology, called path dependence. Have you ever heard of that term, path dependence? You haven't? Okay. Well, all of you have at one point in time been subject to path dependence. Let's imagine that you have found a house you like, and you want to buy it, and you put a $5,000 non-refundable down payment on that house. Then you decide, oh crap, I don't want that house. Or I just got a job offer in another city and I really need to move there. What's it going to cost you to get out of that contract? At least $5,000, right? $5,000. That's path dependence. You have chosen a path. In order to take a different path, you're going to pay a price. Well, that's what the religious right has done. They have chosen the path, in this case, of following or getting into the Republican Party and going down that path, or the Tea Party going down that path. Imagine one day somebody says in the Tea Party meeting, the local Tea Party meeting, hey folks, I think we made a really big mistake. We need to backtrack and get away from this Donald Trump guy and go a different direction. What would happen to that person in that meeting? They would get kicked out. They would lose their friends. They would lose their status. If they were an officer, they'd lose their position. Think of all the things that would happen as a result of them trying to take another path. You can't back up and go another path without a serious, severe price. And that's what the Tea Party has done. That's what the evangelical right's done. The Republicans have done. When the Republicans decided to get in bed with Jerry Falwell in 1980, they were choosing the evangelical path. And they've systematically let the evangelical mentality take over in the Republican Party. Now, if you go back and read the article I mentioned about George Lakoff, you'll find that George Lakoff actually talks about 3 different components of the Republican Party. I'm really only talking about one component, and that's the religious piece that I'm most interested in. So, do you see path dependence? Can you see where that's happening? It would really cost the Republican Party a lot to take a different path. Or the Tea Party a lot to take a different path. Or the evangelicals to take a different path. All 3 of these groups have chosen to join together and go down this path. To back up and go down a different path will be very expensive. And we're seeing the cost of it right today as you watch the election unfold. And this is a non-political talk, by the way. I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm just saying. This is my psychological analysis of what's going on. All right. Pardon? What could I say? So let's talk about this. In the mindset of Calvinists and of the conservatives, immorality equals illegality. Go to Saudi Arabia and challenge their morality, and they will put you in jail for it, right? Try to wear something that's not allowed. Where's Cindy? All right. A recent immigrant from Dubai, Abu Dhabi, I'm sorry. She just arrived here a week ago. Cool. I think she's fun to talk to. So in theocratic societies, morality is legality. And you can't separate the two. Calvinists couldn't separate the two when they came here to, say, Massachusetts. And they set up theocracy. And the Quakers violated their theocracy. The Quakers got hung. That's what happens to people in theocratic societies. They get treated as illegals, as somebody who should be sanctioned in the criminal justice system. So their worldview is filtered through one massively important concept: individual accountability to God's law. And that's really important. If you want to understand how the religious right thinks, you've got to understand this one concept, that you are accountable directly to God, and that relationship is the only one that matters. Nothing else matters. So let's say you hire a policeman, or you elect a mayor, or a city council person, or a sheriff, and they have this belief in individual accountability. God's the only law that matters. What behavior do you start seeing out of that sheriff?
In God we trust bumper
It
stickers.
just happened yesterday. Where'd you see it? What?
In God we trust bumper stickers.
In God we trust bumper stickers. That's exactly what you start seeing. You start seeing signs going up in city council meetings. You see prayers by only Christians, no Hindus, atheists, or other people allowed. You start seeing that kind of behavior, and that just fits within their worldview. It does not compute. Why should we let a Muslim pray? Because this is a Christian nation. And they mean it. There's no other way this could be, because remember, God gave this to us to dominate in the name of Christ. The logic is absolutely perfect. That's why you can't argue this kind of shit with evangelicals, because their fundamental assumption is God gave us this land. If we don't hold it in the name of Christ, we're failing God, and we're going to go to hell. We're going to pay a price for it. It's a pretty deep and strong impetus on this Calvinistic viewpoint that came in clear back in the 1600s. So, coaches, you see coaches and teachers and school districts engaging in this kind of behavior. So it is important who gets into these positions. How did the evangelicals get that sheriff in that position? How did that city council member get elected to that position? Who gave him or her that position?
Constituents.
You did, when you didn't vote. Because the elections are off your elections, especially off your elections, is when they get in. The evangelical right figured out they don't need to worry about the on-year elections, presidential year elections. If they can just get out there and get the vote on the off-year elections, they can get lots of their own people elected. And that's what happened. We, and I'll include myself, we liberals didn't get out there and vote. We didn't do our homework, and we didn't push, and we didn't donate, we didn't volunteer. We sat out the off-year elections. And Jerry Falwell took advantage of us. Now, he's been dead a long time, but his legacy is still going on right now. Pat Robertson, he ain't dead yet. Well, some people think he's brain dead, but he's still going. So imagine every day if you woke up and you saw your neighbor breaking the law in some significant way. They were stealing, they were assaulting other people, they were trashing your lawn. How would you feel if you saw somebody doing that? And you couldn't do anything about it? How would you feel about that? You'd be really pissed off, wouldn't you? And that's what the evangelical right feels. When they see you having sex outside of marriage, when they see you having an abortion, or supporting people who have abortions, or Planned Parenthood, or you give birth control, or you support gay marriage, you're doing this in their mind. Because remember, immorality equals illegality. That's the way their brains work. Immorality equals immorality. They cannot understand. Because this is immoral and just flat wrong, good, bad, black, white. It's all very clear to them. And when you understand that, then I think it makes it easier to see why they behave the way they behave, and why it's so damn hard to move them outside of that and see that other people might want to have rights too. People besides white Christians might want to have the same privileges and benefits in this society. What they see is that liberals, I'm assuming a lot of us in here are liberals. Liberals are in violation of God's laws. And here's the way it works. This guy is illegal. Absolutely illegal. And I don't mean he was born in Kenya. I mean he's illegal because he's black. Isn't that interesting? Blacks should never be over whites. That's the hierarchy. That's the hierarchy that goes back centuries, thousands of years even, but certainly within Christian Calvinism, it's been here since at least John Calvin started. John Calvin was quite racist himself, by the way. But so when you see arguments about Obama's illegal, he was born in Kenya, that's not the real issue. The real issue is a black man should not be over white people, period. That just violates God's fundamental law. Now, go figure. You put a woman here, that's even worse because it clearly says right in the Bible, women should never be over a man. It never be over a man. So we've got two illegals in the White House potentially back to back. That's about as bad. That tells us the United States is going to hell in a handbasket, and we are giving up our nation that Christ and God gave us to dominate and hold forever and ever. Amen. Just like the Lord gave Israel the land of Palestine. So, electing Hillary Clinton would be the ultimate slap in the face of the patriarchal Christian worldview, and it violates the strict father morality. There's nothing about Obama that looks like a strict father to me. He looks like a damn good father, by the way. Nothing about Hillary Clinton could be a strict father because she's not a father, she's a mother. So both of these are fundamental violations of evangelical theology. And last, and certainly not least, is women by definition are immoral. They're sinful and they need male guidance. You ladies, you are going to lead us all astray. And so you need male guidance. And if nobody's above Hillary Clinton, then that means this land is being led by these sinful sects. And that's literally, read your Bible. All you have to do is read it. And you'll find that to be true. So, political correctness is something that Donald Trump espouses that he's not. He doesn't have political correctness. And to him and to people who espouse his structure, this is a direct challenge to the patriarchy. Political correctness challenges the viewpoint that white males should always be on top. The election of a black president, as I said earlier, violates the white over black mentality. Gay marriage is a direct challenge to the strict father gender binary. And a woman president is a direct challenge to God's plan as it's outlined in the Bible, starting with Genesis. You can't violate Christianity and Judaism much more than what we just see right here. There's an interesting article, 25 Reasons Why Evangelicals Support Trump. And I just took one of them because I thought it illustrated so much. In July, white nationalist radio host James Edwards questions if women should be allowed to vote and suggested that a woman, Hillary Clinton, should not be president because women can't even be the ruler of the House under God's law. Brian Fisher said, he's another idiot, evangelical, said essentially the same thing this month in arguing that there's pretty good biblical case that women should not be entrusted with political leadership, unless your name is Michelle Bachmann. I guess you can do that if you're Michelle Bachmann. They don't ever seem to object to women being senators or governors as long as they're friendly to their evangelical viewpoint. So what do we do with all this? Well, first of all, you should understand the difference between direct and systemic causation. Conservatives and evangelicals see the world as cause-effect. Right, wrong, black, white, good, bad. Direct causation deals with a problem via direct action. Systemic causation recognizes that there are many problems arise from the system that they're in and must be dealt with a systemic solution. Systematic thinking is foreign to the conservative mind. It's very foreign to the evangelical mind. Trump likes to deal in direct causation. Build a wall. Pretty simple. You stop all these immigrants from coming in. You deport all the illegals. Pretty simple. They're here today, they're gone tomorrow. Stop all the Muslim immigrants. Make them jump through all sorts of hoops. Don't let any Muslim countries send anybody to us. Give everybody a gun so it stops the bad guys. These are real simple cause-effect ideas. And they resonate with that 30 to 40% of the population that thinks in very concrete terms. They're very concrete thinkers, and they respond to concrete answers. So, if you look at values, and you look at values in local elections, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you will see the strict father mentality coming out throughout all these local elections. And that's why evangelicals have put so much time and energy into local elections, getting school board members and city council members, and evangelizing teachers. There's entire groups teaching teachers how to sneak in their Christianity in the classroom. And of course, you've got other things. What's the after-school children's group?
Good news.
Good News Club. You got the Good News Club. You got people like that are pushing this stuff. Well, I love the fact that Satanic Temple is now having a children's program. I want to volunteer to teach that one. So what you see in the strict father election is local law enforcement. They're there to enforce a moral code. Now, they may not be in the books anymore that you can't be gay, but they're going to persecute you anyway. It may not be in the books anymore that they can't, it may not be in the books that they can't stop you, but if you look Hispanic, we're going to stop you. And you know, Sheriff Arapo, or whatever his name is, now got a court case against him for having arrested people illegally that had the crime of looking a Latino, I guess. Elected sheriffs are persecuting gays, and they're failing to protect people based upon their sexual or gender status. And then, of course, you see school boards being elected to teach abstinence only and intelligent design. And yeah, we have to challenge them, but who put them in those seats to begin with? And we have to take some responsibility here. We have to realize that our failure to vote in off-year elections has allowed this to happen to us. We can't just blame the religious right. So, I want you to learn how to control your own brain for a change. And here's some tips for how to deal, and Anthony will love this stuff. And oh, by the way, I want to talk about your thing just a little bit later. I want to let everybody know about it. So, I'm going to tell you something. I want you to follow my directions very carefully, okay? Are you ready? Don't think of an elephant. Okay, how many of you followed my directions? You all violated I told you not to do that. Don't do that. Okay, what does that tell us? When you bring up an idea, even if it's a negative idea, the brain can only function in positive terms, positive images, if you will. So I say, don't think of an elephant. Your brain first has to come and say, what's an elephant? Oh, that's an elephant. Oh, I just did what he told me not to do. So your brain creates a frame, and in evoking the frame, you have to find a positive way to formulate in that brain. This is a really important concept that comes from George Lakoff's work. If I say, let's talk about illegal aliens, illegals coming into the United States. Let's you and me have an argument about that. And I'm a Trump supporter. Well, I'm going to clue you in. You've already lost the argument. Because you started off with the wrong set of values. You started off with their values. Don't think of illegal aliens, please. Don't think of illegal immigrants, please. What just comes into your mind? I want to get some of your images. Don't think of illegal immigrants. What's some images that just jump in your mind? Let's be honest about this, because we all have them. What are some images that come in?
Somebody jumping a fence at night.
Somebody jumping a fence at night. Thank you, exactly. Other images.
Truckload of boxcar people coming across the border.
A truckload of boxcar people coming across the border? Okay, good. How many of you see those kind of images the minute I say that? A bunch of us do, don't we? So here's the deal. When you argue from their value structure, you've already lost the argument. Don't think of an elephant. We have to come from our value system, and that's the most important thing. I'm going to teach you how to do that in just a minute. But first of all, I want to make an observation. What has Hillary Clinton been doing lately around Donald Trump?
Being quiet.
Yeah. She's been quiet. She hasn't been arguing with him.
She's like a father figure to speak on her behalf of her husband or mom.
Yeah. There you go. But she's being really quiet, isn't she? Isn't it interesting that she's quiet? Because you can't argue with Donald Trump. You will lose the argument because you're starting from the wrong spot. George Lakoff has been pretty influential in the last few years around the progressive thinkers and teaching concepts around these values. So, let's begin with this notion. Don't argue their position. Their position is not your position, so don't start from them. Start with your own position. State your own positive values. Now, this takes a little work on your part, and you don't want to go off half-cocked. So it means you need to understand what your values are. Folks, these people are going to church every Sunday, and they're being told what their values are. They memorize their values. We don't have ours memorized quite yet. So we need to understand what our values are. Let me give you an example or two, and you make your own up. These are some that I could certainly adhere to. I value every woman having control over her body and her mind. I value children being free from hunger, no matter who their parents are. I value human rights above corporate rights. Now, when you put that value out there, policy flows from that. Ideas about how to solve problems flow from that. If I value children no matter who their parents are, do I care if it's Salvation Army feeding them, or the Catholic Church feeding them, or an atheist group feeding them, or the government feeding them? I just want kids to be fed. So my policies may flow in that direction. Whereas if I do care what their parents are, then welfare kids shouldn't get the kind of food. Welfare kids shouldn't get steaks. We should not be giving kids on welfare steaks. Welfare kids should only get one meal a day at school, and then it should not be the same meal that the middle-class kids get at school. You see how the policy flows from the values. So start with your positive values. And you may want to sit down and say, what are my values? What are my values in this election cycle? Why am I voting for this candidate? Do they follow the values that I believe in? So state your values in clear, positive terms, and then discuss policy, the kinds of things you want your legislatures and your presidents and your governors to do as a result of the values that you espouse. Humanistic values, of course, is what most of us have, but we need to be articulate about that. And then the next thing we do is get out there and vote. We need to get out and volunteer. We need to give money. We need to give money to people that have a chance of winning. There are candidates that I didn't think had a snowball's chance 3 weeks ago, and suddenly are looking like they might win. So do some research. Find a congressional candidate. My favorite candidate is a woman running for Senate. Yeah.
Congressional candidate.
Oh, good. Oh, you are?
Yes.
All right. Here's money. Give money. Give money. Congressional candidate, a city council member, of state legislator, Gail Jordan is the executive director of our organization, Recovering from Religion, and she is running for state senate in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Now, the guy that holds that seat is a Republican, has been in that seat for 12 years. I think she has a chance to beat him. And she has a chance because she's got deep roots in that community, and she's already proven herself in many ways. She deserves our support. Or people like her deserve our support. There's a candidate running for Senate, U.S. Senate, out of Oklahoma. It's Sean Brady. I think the guy deserves it. Even if he doesn't win, he's scaring the hell out of some people who ought to be listening to him. All right, so the last thing I'm going to encourage you to do is get out and vote. Find a candidate that supports the values you hold dear. Even if they're not perfect. I know a lot of people were strong with Bernie Sanders. Bernie, to me, was pretty damn perfect. But he's not the candidate. Right. So let's find a candidate that actually works for us and get out there and vote. All right, thanks for listening, guys. Before I take, I'm happy to answer some questions, but before I do, I just want to say, this is kind of an aside. Anthony and Dr. Peter Bogosian have a new application out that I think is awesome. I've gone to 3 levels of it, and so far I'm really impressed. What's the name of it again, Anthony?
Atheos.
Atheos. You can download it for your iPhone, and it will teach you all sorts of stuff. It'll teach you all sorts of stuff, and so I would just encourage you to get out there and look at it. It's good stuff. Cutting edge kind of stuff, and if you haven't read Dr. Bogosian's book, Manual for Creating Atheists, I would encourage you to do that as well. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Darrel, thank you.
Yeah.
Does strict father mentality apply to notions such as government knows best or government should have ultimate authority?
Yeah, I think it has something to do with that, but only if you espouse the values of the people who have that religious proclivity. For example, I think Jerry Falwell thought government had a strong role in making sure women don't get abortions. So that's a strict father mentality. I'm not saying, I think FDR had a pretty strong strict father mentality in some ways. And he seems to still work with the system, though. He wasn't going to go incarcerate people in Guantanamo Bay or anything like that. Although he did incarcerate Japanese. He did violate the Constitution. So I think there's elements on both sides. And I would say it's possible that either party could steal that and use it. And that we wouldn't even be surprised. I think Teddy Roosevelt was a very strict father. I mean, he could be really strict in some ways. So I think the elements are there no matter what political group you. But in different election cycles, I think you're going to see that stripping back and forth. Right now, the Republicans and their religious right seem to hold the strict father mentality strongest. Is that an answer or not?
It's just a question because
Yeah.
to some people, government, it seems that government should have ultimate authority and knows best. And that seems
Well,
to be
and
that would seem to be a strict father notion.
Joseph Stalin was definitely a strict father, yeah. So yeah, you could go that far, I have no doubt about that. You had a question?
I was just going to ask if the phone app was available for Android as well as iOS.
It is.
Both platforms.
Nick?
I've heard of it. Let me grab something.
If the individual relationship to God is the most important thing, then why do Calvinists worry about what other people do privately, personally?
Because God put them on this planet to rule the planet. The righteous shall rule the planet, and that's also where manifest destiny comes from. And if you're not following God's law, then you're potentially leading others astray. Now, you got to depend. It depends on which version of Calvinist we're talking about, because there's 5 or 6 different major strains of Calvinism, and Calvin himself would say, "I don't really care. Just don't come into my territory. I'll cut your head off or hang you or burn you alive," which he did, you know. But there's other versions of Calvinism that simply say, well, you could be leading other people astray. So that's why we're concerned that you're getting birth control, because then you'll lead other people astray and probably get to my daughter or my son or whatever. I don't know. Do you have a question? Oh, yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood what you said. So if I didn't, you can correct it. But
Thank you. I appreciate that. Some people just go off.
when you were talking about Calvinism, and you said that there was this kind of element of, you're either saved or you're not saved.
Yeah.
Then to me, it's like, let's say you were in that system, you could just do whatever you want to. Like if you're the saved person, you do whatever you want. You're not going to be saved. If you don't know which, you can just do whatever you want to anyway. So why would you care about anything? Just do what feels good to you.
Yeah, you're using logic here. Calvinist wasn't particularly, John Calvin wasn't particularly logical. So there was some pretty stupid things, but when you start with his basic assumption of there are a few elect, and God figures those people out, and you will only know when you get to heaven, then you just have to act your best until you get there and find out, uh-oh, I went the wrong way. But see, God knows this now. God knows whether you're going to heaven or hell 14 billion years ago. He knew it long before you were
6,000 years ago.
before the first star died for you. He was in the know about your salvation status. Don't ask me to defend Calvinism. It's a dumb system.
You do beat 6,000.
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? God knew it 14 billion years ago and 6,000 years ago. Oh yeah, don't use logic around this stuff. It doesn't work that well. I'm just giving you the basics. Remember tulip. Isn't that sweet, tulip? You're going to hell with tulip. Yeah.
How do people coming from a Calvinist point of view reconcile minimizing government with the strong father? How can we minimize government with government as the
Because the strong father is there to enforce God's law and God's morality. That's the focus of government. And that was the focus from the very first day the Pilgrims, the Puritans, landed in Massachusetts. They set up a theocratic government, and the government wasn't going to mess with your economics, except on Sunday, of course. And as long as your economics weren't immoral. The government's there to enforce a strict morality that gender binary's got to be enforced, no sex before marriage, no sex outside of marriage. There's all these rules, and the government's there to enforce those. So strict father is very important there. Your father's the one in charge of you. If you're his daughter, if I'm your father, and you sin, if you have sex outside of marriage, I'm the one responsible. I'm guilty.
I get that, but
Yeah.
along with that, and I know I'm asking you to explain the elephant, which can't be done, but most of the same people believe in reduction of government.
They believe in reduction of government except with respect to morality. See, people keep mixing these two things up. Well, you believe in big government. Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell believed in big government when it dealt with strict father stuff. Now, what are the issues that deal with strict father? The military. The military is the epitome of strict father. So, Jerry Falwell's gung-ho for that. Defense of Israel, strict father, gung-ho for that. Welfare reform, let's knock those welfare queens out. That's strict father stuff. Birth control, no, they can't have it. Let's stop abortion, strict father stuff. That's big government, but in the strict father part.
But we don't want to take care of old people and poor people.
Yeah. No, because the church should be doing that. And that's very important in the God virus metaphor that I use in my book, The God Virus. The church should be taking care of the widows and the poor. It says right in the Bible, not the government. And if you're not in a church, then it's your own damn fault you're not getting supported by the church. Makes perfect sense to me. I read the Bible. It makes sense to me. So if you starve because the government didn't have a good agricultural program, see, they get rid of the Department of Agriculture, get rid of the Department of Education, because education should be privatized. Churches. Jerry Falwell said that before he died. He said, I hope I live to see the day when government's no longer involved in education. That's a direct quote from Jerry Falwell. That's strict father, because churches should be taking care of that. Good questions, folks. Good questions, yeah.
Do you feel that capitalism and Calvinism are inextricably linked and feed each other?
Well, Weber wrote a book called The Protestant Ethic back in the year 1900, and it comes right out of Calvinism. What Weber identified as he was a sociologist and social theorist was that Calvinism was a strong element in capitalism, and that capitalism probably would have developed differently, or maybe even not at all, without Calvinism. Because this notion that you are totally responsible for your success is kind of a Calvinist approach, and Trump loves that. Trump says, I'm the most successful, I made it all myself. He hardly ever mentions the fact that his dad gave him most of that money, and he's lost a lot of it several times over, but he always misses that point there. The Calvinist notion that you are... I've been watching a lot of the Olympics, and what I have loved about the Olympics so far is that so few people have thanked Jesus for their victory. But there were those three women that won. God, Jesus, Jesus, God. Every other word was Jesus, God, and bullshit stuff, Jesus wanted them to win that, but it didn't matter whether Michael Phelps won his 23 or not. Michael Phelps hasn't said God's responsible for anything he's done. So it's kind of interesting because you can see the Protestant work ethic in sports. And you can see it a lot. When people give thanks to God, part of that's the Protestant people, that's the Calvinistic approach right there. God is responsible for my success. I better make sure I give him thanks. Now, we out here in the logic world think, well, he's thanking God and he thinks he should win over his opponent. No, that's not what they're thinking. They're thinking that you remember I said earlier that somebody who's wealthy it's a sign that they have been elected? Well, if I get a touchdown, it's not a sign that my team's better than yours. It's a sign I'm going to heaven and you're not. That's really what's going on here. And I better remember to thank God. Now it's even bled over into the Catholics. Catholics sit down and do this every time they get a touchdown, especially Notre Dame. So, all right, I'm sorry. Did that answer your question a little bit? Where was the question? I got too many old-timers disease. It's getting in here. Other questions? Yeah.
This hierarchy seems universal, and in other religions, like, do you know anything about, like in Muslim countries, where that comes from? Because it's obviously not Calvinist.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's why I said early on, Calvin doesn't explain all of this, but explains a lot of what we see in the United States. No, it comes from patriarchal religions, period. And if you read my book, Sex and God, I talk a lot about that. Anywhere you see a patriarchal religion, you see a hierarchy. In a matriarchal or a non-patriarchal religion, hierarchies are much less important and maybe almost non-existent. Certainly different. And I talk in the book, I talk about the Mangaean culture, that women really are the leaders, the sexual leaders of, and some of the political leaders in the system, and things like no boy they can have sex anytime they want, but the boy has to learn how to give a woman 3 orgasms before he has one himself. And if he can't, and if he can't do that, he's not a real man. Now, that doesn't sound like anything I've heard of here in the States, but it's a little. Or the Muoso, where there's no word for husband, there's no word for father in that culture. They're a Chinese group. Chinese culture has been around. We know it's been around a long time because Marco Polo visited them. He thought they were really weird, but for many reasons. But in the Muoso culture, the woman, when she gets her first period, she becomes a full woman and she gets an outdoor entrance to the compound. But all the women stay together, and the men have to leave. So, so you can't. I'm sorry. The men stay. Let me back up here. Women never marry. There's no marriage in that culture, and there's no fatherhood in that culture. When the woman gets her period, then she gets her own door, and she can invite any man she wants into her abode. There's just a few rules. He's not exclusive to her. She can choose any man she wants, and he has to be out before breakfast. Men cannot stay. Men cannot stay beyond breakfast in the Muoso culture. But the women clearly rule the roost and govern the sexual relationships. There's no word for father. If you ask a Muoso woman, who is the father of your child here, she would laugh at you. I don't even know what that word means. We don't know who the father is. I had sex with 17 men. I don't care. Because my uncles are the father figure. In the Muoso culture, uncles serve as the fathers. And the Chinese Communist government tried to destroy this culture. They worked very hard to force them to get married and do all sorts of shit. But when the communists kind of went down, in the 1990s, the Muoso came right back, and they're back to where they were before. There's a couple of interesting documentaries you can watch. National Geographic did a great documentary on the Muoso. And they're still existing today, just in some ways, just like they did when Marco Polo came through. And N-A is one word. I mean, there's 2 different words, Na, N-A, or the Muoso, M-O-U-S-O. I'm sorry, M-U-O-S-O, M-U-O-S-O, sorry about that. Right. Either one, I'll get it to you. And I could go, that's why I wrote the book Sex and God, which both books will be on sale back here, or cash, check, or credit card if you want. $15.95. $16 if I sign it, though. $16 if I sign it. Any other questions? Okay, well, I guess we're partying tonight, right?
Yeah.
Where?
Rosendale, 1604 Babcock.
All right.
7 p.m.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me again. I always love talking to you guys.
I'm going to give it all right now. Okay. I wrote notes. We don't have to. You can shut off all the order.
Perfect. Because that's right. Okay.
So y'all know me, I'm Deb Bridgman, and I've been the VP for FACT for several years, and my main job is bringing in the speakers. And I'd like to thank Darrel Ray, who's been here. And I'm pretty much sure that 100% he will be back. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I noticed a couple of people are taking the video. Do we have this is our first time here, so do y'all have like a website where we could actually download the video? Because my brother doesn't read. So I was just wondering if maybe I could get this for him.
So this is Sean.
Hello.
Sean, you want to stand up and wave to the crowd? Sean actually is in charge of the Secular Student Alliance and UTSA. He's on the FACT board, and he set all that up. And what we'll do, how are people going to access this?
Okay, so this
Can
is.
you hear? Come on.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, all right. Let's do it. Okay, so live streaming these is going to be relatively new, and of course, it's going to depend on the consent of the speaker. So, as of this moment, before I get access to all of the FACT media and stuff, right now I'm streaming it on my Twitter. I'm going to try to figure out. Does
FACT has a Twitter.
Yeah.
I need to talk to Donna Swafford because we really haven't used it much, and we want to increase that. Actually, Sean's going to help with that. How many of you are on our meetup? Meetup, right? How many of you are on our Facebook? How many of you are on none of our social media or websites? Is there anybody? Well, you just said meetup. That counts. Are you guys together?
Yeah.
I was like worried for a split second. I'm like, I know I saw them walk in together, but what if I'm wrong? Right. So she's going to help you set up your social media. She's going to get you on one of those. But even if she doesn't, if you're nice to her, I think she'll help you out with this. But we'll get you we'll put it up on all of our sites, how to access this. Okay. And what I'll do also, I'll work with Katie. We'll create a little, for those of you that are tech savvy, Phil, help me out if I say this wrong. But what are those little boxes that have, you hit it and you can, with your screen, and you can tell what URL to go to? You know what I'm talking about? It's like a barcode, but it's this box.
Oh, the QR code. QR code. Then you scan.
What's it called?
The one that you
QR code. QR? There's a way that you can make those, and we will have up front just a sheet of QR codes to get to all of our all of our links. And that way you guys can just come in with your smartphone and let it do what it does and bring you right over there. So we'll think of that for next time. But we'll make sure that, yeah, she likes that. We don't have a YouTube. Okay, so, and maybe we'll. Possibility. So we'll try to get more and more of this up and running. Because I mean, when I think back since 2012, I made a little printout of all the people we've had. I mean, it's been impressive. How cool would that have been if we had uploaded? But live and learn, and we'll go forward. So you will.
Okay, so right now we have it on Twitter. We're going to try to see if we can get that around. But for the many people who don't have Twitter, I just got one because I hate Twitter. I have the file saved to my phone, and I'm going to start uploading it to the Facebook group, or the Facebook page immediately as soon as I get access to that. So it should honestly be up, and just depends on how the reception is around here. But
so want to put it in the group one? Can we do that?
I can put it in the group. I can share it to the group.
Let's share. Yeah, we'll share it. So, and I'll explain that in a second.
And then Anthony also.
Anthony, yes.
And Anthony's been filming too. So
you've been filming too.
We got a second.
Yeah, so we'll try to get all of that uploaded and word out to everybody.
Many
how
options.
we can get to that, and then we'll continue to do that. Maybe we'll have Anthony's work available, and maybe we'll highlight when Phil does Atheist Experience. We'll steal that URL, so when people in San Antonio are doing fun things, we'll advertise.
But hey, we need to give some applause to Sean. Great job.
So for those of you that want to come out, hang out, drink or not drink with Darrel tonight, we will be at Hills and Dales. It is a bar on the outside of 1604, right around Babcock, right?
Do they just serve beer, or do they do mixers and wine too? Do you know?
It's like a lot of beer, probably some wine. I'm not sure if they do mixers. It's a real thing.
Do you need a motorcycle to go?
Do you need a motorcycle? Or a picture of one?
Do they have juice boxes?
They do not have juice boxes.
Damn it.
What time?
7 p.m., sir.
Is it 21 and over, or?
Well, I think it's one of those places where you just walk in as long as you're not drinking at the bar. They don't ask, but there's also an outside area and a covered area.
Do they serve food?
No, but there's like a Pizza Hut walking distance.
I mean, because if they're food established.
I'll just be outside of the window and I'll wave to everybody from outside.
Yeah, we'll have to look, but I'll post on the Facebook. I'll call them and make sure that, you know, as long as people aren't drinking, that people can be sitting, because they've got it's actually was bought by is it the Friendly? What did I say it was? The Friendly Spot.
Oh, the Friendly
Spot. The Friendly Spot owners bought this, and all the motorcyclists went away when they heard that. No, it's not. But anyway, so that's that. Ramp project has been really, really successful. We've built 8 ramps now. Started in January. We've been building the wheelchair ramps since January, and our next one will be the second Saturday of September. And actually, Phil brought the project to, or at least brought the atheist community to the project in Austin. So if you live in Austin or you feel like going up there on a different Saturday, you can follow the ACA, Atheist Community of Austin, their website. They're doing ramps too, and actually drove up. They do some cool things up there as well. This just out, and we'll get this on our website. Shelley Segal is coming Friday, September 17th. Yay! If you've never heard her sing, it is angelic, truly. And Darrel told me this morning he credits with finding her for the First Reason rally. So he's the reason she's so popular with us, I guess. And so she will be at Big Bob's Burger, I think the one on Hildebrand where we had it last time. And that again will be, and that's family friendly. And that will be September 17th. She always sells her CDs. It's always a good time. And I'm sure we'll figure out what she's doing the rest of the weekend. And then Saturday, September 18th would be our regular lecture, and we will have Steve Bratting from Austin, ACA and Center of Inquiry will be driving down to speak about GMOs. October 15th is Ed Brayton, and November 19th is Joyce Townsend from San Antonio talking about abortion laws in Texas. And then, of course, December 11th will be our solstice party. Let me say thank you to Katie Wainwright, who was with the mic. She is now working on membership, correct, for facts, so you may want to approach her. And let me just take a minute to talk about membership. The money that you give when you join or if you donate does not go in the pockets of any of the officers or any of the staff. We don't use it to, you know, pay for our clothes or, you know, or go out and get a mani-pedi, you know, or feed our kids. We don't use it for that. What we use it for, we use it for getting the radius. We use it for any advertising we do, and we'd like to do more of that. We get it for our website, which has been a disaster for years because of coding issues, and actually, I think this is going to be the year, the end of 2016 and into 17, that we're going to get a new website, one that we can actually update in a reasonable way. It pays for banners, it pays for some of the food at some of the events when it's an open event, but for the most part, it is about the lecture series and the events that we put on and the advertising we do. So it really helps when you join. You don't have to join though, just know that it helps. And I think that's everything I had to say. Any questions from the crowd, or if you have suggestions? Oh, address for Hills and Dales, 15403 White Fawn Drive. It's just west of Babcock, so if you go to the Babcock exit, you will see it there. If you miss it, you have to go all the way around the upper. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Could we possibly post that onto post the address onto maybe the Facebook?
I will do that as soon as I get home.
Nice.
And if you have a suggestion, I know Scott asked me earlier in the year to see if we can get Guy P. Harrison out here, and we're looking at having him come sometime in the winter, maybe January or February. If there's someone in the community or in the science community, as long as they're honorariums, don't break the bank, or their travel costs don't break the bank, we would love to bring them here because that's part of what FACT wants to do. Questions or suggestions? I'm open. You don't have to say it here. You can tell me later if you don't want to speak up. But other than that, thank you for coming to another one of our lectures.